The letter arrived on a day as grey as grief, the sky heavy with unspoken sorrow. Maggie's grandmother Alice had passed away, leaving behind a legacy wrapped in mystery. Gone to a place where whispers followed you into the silence, where echoes of the past lingered. The inheritance was a house, but not just any house, a grand old thing, shrouded in ivy and mist, in a village where the fog rolled in like fear itself. Maggie hesitated, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. She'd always been afraid of dolls, their lifeless eyes and eerie presence. Their glassy eyes, forever staring, seemed to follow her every move. Their porcelain smiles, hiding something cold and unfeeling, sent shivers down her spine. Alice had collected them, an army of silent witnesses in that house of shadows, each one holding a piece of the past. Maggie wasn't sure she wanted to go, but something drew her, an inexplicable pull, a pull towards the darkness like a moth to a flickering flame, unable to resist the allure of the unknown. As she drove into the village, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows. Shadows stretched, reaching for her car as if trying to pull her in, the road ahead cloaked in mystery. She could swear the trees whispered her name, their branches swaying like skeletal fingers. The wind carried their secrets, rustling leaves like hushed pronouncements, filling the air with an eerie sense of foreboding. The house loomed, a silhouette against the dying light, its windows, dark eyes watching her approach. She parked the car, a splash of colour in the encroaching greyness. Silence pressed in, heavy and expectant. Taking a shaky breath, she reached for her suitcase. It felt heavier than usual, as if the silence itself was weighing her down. The air inside was cold, stale, the scent of decay and something faintly sweet, like old perfume. Dust motes danced in the moonlight, filtering through the grimy windows. She walked through the house, each footstep echoing in the stillness. The furniture was draped in white sheets, ghostly figures in the gloom. She could hear the scuttling of mice, the creaking of the old house settling. Or was it settling? Was it the house or something else stirring in the shadows? Days blurred into nights. Maggie started the daunting task of cleaning, unearthing memories buried under layers of dust and time. She found old photographs, their edges brown and brittle. Alice as a young girl, her eyes full of life, a haunting resemblance to Maggie. And always, in the background, the dolls. Silent observers to a life lived, a life lost. She discovered a diary tucked away in the attic, its pages filled with Alice's elegant script. The words spoke of loneliness, of whispers in the night, of the dolls, and how they seemed to watch her, their painted smiles unchanging in the flickering candlelight. Maggie shivered, closing the diary with a snap. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, her every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The heart of the house and the source of Maggie's growing unease was the doll room. It was Alice's sanctuary, a shrine to her porcelain children, dozens of them arranged on shelves in glass cabinets, their faces pale and perfect in the dim light. Maggie stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. The air felt heavy, thick with an unseen presence. The dolls stared back at her, their expressions unnervingly lifelike. She could have sworn she saw one of them blink, its glassy eyes glinting in the shadows. She shook her head, her pulse quickening. It was just her imagination playing tricks in the silence of the old house, but as she turned to leave, she heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, like the rustle of silk against porcelain. "Mama?" Sleep offered no escape. Every night she would lie down hoping for a reprieve, but the darkness brought no solace. The whispers continued, weaving themselves into her dreams. They were soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the rustling of leaves outside, but soon they grew louder, more insistent. The dolls, their painted smiles taking on a sinister cast in the flickering candlelight of her nightmares, seemed to come alive. Their eyes, once mere glass, now glinted with a malevolent intelligence. She would wake with a start, her heart pounding, the feeling of unseen eyes upon her, lingering long after the dreams had faded. The sensation was so strong, it felt as if someone was standing right beside her bed, watching her every move. One night she woke to a cold draught. The chill was unusual, almost unnatural, as if it carried with it a whisper of something otherworldly. The window was open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. She was certain she had closed it before going to bed. But what chilled her to the bone was the sight of the doll on her nightstand. It was a gift from her grandmother, meant to be a comforting presence. It had been moved, turned to face her. She was sure it had been facing the other way when she went to sleep. Its porcelain face, so innocent in the daylight, seemed almost predatory in the moonlight. The shadows cast by the moonlight made its features appear sharper, more menacing, and its eyes, those lifeless glass eyes, seemed to follow her every move. No matter where she went in the room, she felt their unblinking gaze upon her. She stumbled out of bed, her fear a living thing, wrapping itself around her like a shroud. Her breaths came in short, panicked gasps as she tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to her core, that she was no longer alone in the house. The presence was palpable, a dark shadow lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Maggie found herself drawn back to the doll room, as if in a trance. The door creaked open, the sound amplified in the silence of the house. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust and decay, and something else, something cloying and sweet, like the scent of death. The dolls were arranged in a circle on the floor, their vacant eyes staring up at her. She took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. She was locked in. Panic surged through her, cold and crippling. The whispers started again, swirling around her, growing louder, more insistent. They were no longer soft and childlike. They were filled with a cold, malevolent intelligence that made her blood run cold. The whispers began to take on a rhythm, a cadence. They were chanting, their voices overlapping, rising and falling like a macabre lullaby. The temperature in the room dropped, a bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into her very marrow. One by one, the dolls began to turn their heads, their glassy eyes fixing on Maggie. She was surrounded, trapped in a circle of porcelain and malice. The largest doll, the one Alice had called Elizabeth, stood in the center of the circle. Its once fine silk gown was tattered, its porcelain face cracked and stained. But it was the eyes that held Maggie captive. They seemed to burn with a cold inner fire, reflecting a depth of malice that made her want to scream. And then Elizabeth spoke. Her voice was a raspy whisper, as if from beyond the grave, carrying with it an unsettling chill that seemed to freeze the very air around her. It echoed in the silence of the room, each word sending a fresh wave of terror through Maggie, who stood frozen, unable to comprehend the horror unfolding before her. "You've come?" Elizabeth rasped, her porcelain head tilting to one side, the movement slow and deliberate, as if savouring the moment. "We've been waiting for you, Maggie," she continued, her voice dripping with a sinister glee that made Maggie's skin crawl. Maggie's voice was trapped in her throat, a silent scream that refused to break free. She tried to speak, to scream, but no sound came out, her vocal cords paralyzed by the sheer terror that gripped her. She was paralyzed with fear, her eyes fixed on Elizabeth's malevolent gaze, unable to look away from the doll's piercing stare. "You can't escape us," Elizabeth whispered, her voice growing stronger, filled with a chilling power that seemed to seep into Maggie's very soul. "You're one of us now," she declared, her words echoing with a finality that left no room for doubt. The other dolls began to move, their porcelain limbs creaking and groaning as they rose to their feet, their movements jerky and unnatural. They advanced on Maggie, their eyes burning with an eerie light, their painted smiles taking on a predatory cast, as if they were savouring the fear they had instilled in her. Maggie thrashed, her screams echoing unheard in the confines of the doll room. The dolls closed in, their cold porcelain skin pressing against her, their glassy eyes boring into her soul. She could feel their icy fingers digging into her flesh, their grip surprisingly strong. Their whispers filled her ears, a cacophony of voices, all chanting the same chilling refrain. "Join us! She struggled against their grasp, her terror fueling a surge of desperate strength, but they were too many, their grip too strong. She felt herself being dragged down, pulled towards the center of the circle, Elizabeth's chilling laughter echoing in her ears. Maggie's vision blurred, her struggles growing weaker. She could feel a strange numbness spreading through her limbs, replacing the terror with a chilling apathy. She looked down at her hands, but all she saw was porcelain, white and cold. Her scream died in her throat, replaced by a soft, hollow sigh. She saw her reflection in the glassy eyes of one of the dolls. Her face, once filled with life and fear, was now smooth and expressionless, her eyes vacant and staring. Her lips curved into a chilling smile, mirroring the grotesque joy on the faces of the dolls surrounding her. She was one of them now, trapped forever in the cold embrace of the doll collection. The doll room was silent. The dolls stood motionless, their porcelain faces frozen in expressions of eerie serenity. The only sound was the faint creaking of the old house, settling into the silence. But beneath the surface, a cold, malevolent energy thrummed. The collection was complete, and it waited with infinite patience for the next soul to claim. If you liked this video, like it and subscribe to my channel.